I started on my father's farm, at first, just like everyone else, I didn't have knowledge. I didn't grow up in a farming background. We didn't have chickens at home. So I never really knew how to do this thing. So what did I do? I tried to watch as many YouTube videos as possible. For me, that was the first thing. But the content wasn't really there. There were no people trying to explain to you how to raise chickens and how to farm chickens, dot to dot. So my mom had a brother, a younger brother, who was keeping chickens. He was keeping maybe about 500 chickens. I went to him just one day and he explained to me a few things. But of course I knew that's not enough. So I went on the internet, and just like they always tell us, if you want to hide something from the black man, you put it inside a book. I went on the internet and downloaded a lot of books about poultry farming, which I actually noticed a lot of other farmers don't do. Because when I was reading a lot of what was in these books, I found out that even what this person had told me, the practical bit, a lot of it was wrong. Yeah? So he was practicing things, but maybe that's the reason his farm wasn't growing too quickly, because he wasn't doing things the exact way the things are supposed to be done. So I tried to read as many books as possible. Then I tried to book a few appointments with other big farmers, after watching TV and seeing interviews here in Uganda. You try to link up with the people, but none of them was really forthcoming. I did manage to meet up with them, maybe because they were busy. I don't blame them. Maybe because they were busy or they had things to do, so I didn't meet up with them. So I used only the knowledge that I had read and that one visit to that farmer to actually start up my farm. And they always say experience is the best teacher. So I started up with my 800 birds, and the brooding was very okay. It went like, the way it's supposed to be in the textbook. But after that, I started facing a few challenges. But luckily enough, I'm from a background where I believe that anything can be learned by anyone, as long as you put your heart to it. So every time I would find a challenge, I wouldn't just go and ask another farmer, how can this be done? How can this be done? I would try to read up as much as possible. So slowly by slowly, my knowledge in poultry farming kept increasing. And I can say I actually even became better than a lot of farmers who had been present in the field for a long time. Because a lot of farmers rely on knowledge that they get from other farmers. And a lot of knowledge that's passed on from person to person is actually wrong knowledge. Yeah, it's not the correct knowledge. But for me, because I was trying to read up as much as possible and trying to understand things, I got to understand the first principles of how to raise chickens, of how to manage chickens. So by the time my entire first cycle of raising chickens was done, I was almost an expert at poultry farming because I understood everything from first principles. And so when I started, I actually told myself that I'm going to teach other people how to do farming, because for me it was hard to start out. It was hard to get all this information from the internet and everything. So I told myself I must teach people. So I decided to actually start a YouTube channel. I think that's how I came up with Farm Up. Yeah, I first started with a YouTube channel simply to teach other people the things that I didn't get an opportunity to learn myself.
So before we move any further, could you, among there's so many books that you read, could you please point out at least one book that made you change your way and thinking of how doing this?
Interesting. I won't even tell you that there is a book whose title I remember, because when you search on the internet poultry farming or feeding poultry farms and you just put PDFs, I think I got over 50 books on the internet. And when you read, then give you all the information, you go and check out another one. So I have very many, actually even up to now, I still have very many of them on my phone. But I won't tell you that there was one specific one that I found was very good in everything. It was about trying to reconcile the information from all the different sources, because each and every book will give you very good information about something good, one thing, and then you need to get more information about another thing from something else. I personally never ever met any of the big farmers. Even up to now, the big farmers I've met are simply because they are my clients right now. But when it's about meeting them to get information, a lot of them, I'll tell you the honest truth. I personally, when I started sharing information on my YouTube channel, a lot of people who are in poultry WhatsApp groups, a lot of farmers were against it because they like keeping the information to themselves. They don't want other people to get to know this information because they feel like they'll get a lot of competition and, it will push them out of the market. So a lot of people are against it. At first people are like, you're giving people poison, you're giving people what? They didn't want me to continue doing it. And I believe that's the reason it was hard for me to meet these people, because I feel like a lot of them didn't want to give out the information. And even up to now, when I share the information online, some people don't like it because they feel like now everyone can start a poultry farm, anyone can manage a poultry farm because you're giving them the information. So they feel like it's a bad thing for them. So the challenges are basic. Of course, we've already talked about the challenge of knowledge. I believe that's the most important challenge. If you don't have knowledge, you can't do anything. Yeah? Then you've talked about the capital. But the third one, which I feel is very important, is the field of farming is very volatile. Things change so quickly. When I was starting my poultry farm, I was told that a kilogram of maize is 600 shillings. Now, me, I didn't know that the prices change. The friend I asked told me, 600, you'll get maize, 600. So me, I planned my money, I planned my money. I'm like, I'll have enough money to feed my birds. And so I bring my 800 birds. The time when I started my farm, a kilogram of maize was 1,300. That was more than double. So if you, for example, put aside 5 million to feed your chickens, all of a sudden you're going to pay 11 million. Yeah? And you're starting to think, what is this? So I struggled so much when it came to feeding my birds, simply because I didn't plan. It's not like I blame the market for being volatile. It's only because I didn't know. If I had known, I would have planned better. But I didn't know. And so my first few months until the chickens started laying were so hard. I reached points where I wasn't eating personally. I had to prioritize the chickens. So all the money that I get was buying chicken feed. So it was very, very difficult when it came to feeding the birds. The other thing that I faced was getting people to work on the farm. Because I personally, at that time, I was still practicing as a doctor. I didn't just quit and go away. Yeah, I quit after some time. But at that time, I was still practicing as a doctor. So that means Monday to Friday, I was practicing as a doctor, and over the weekend, I would be on the farm. But the people who I would work with, a lot of them didn't know things, and a lot of them were thieves. Yeah, they would steal, take the things away. So it made it very, very difficult for me. Getting people who you can trust, getting people who can manage the thing for you, it became a very big hurdle for me starting out. So I feel like those were the main hurdles. I think I was being paid about 3 million shillings per month. And when I did the math, my birds were feeding on about 4.5 million per month in terms of feed. Now, of course, I have other costs. I have to pay rent, I have to buy my food, I have to eat all these things. So at the beginning, of course, the birds feed on little, but with time, towards production, they were feeding on a lot. That's about the 4.5 million. So it was very, very difficult. So the way that I managed to go around it, honestly, was from borrowing because I didn't plan for it. It was from borrowing. A lot of farmers, what they choose to do is to decrease on the amount of food they give the chickens, which is the worst thing that you can do. That's what I keep telling farmers. It's one of the commonest mistakes people make. They either decrease on the amount of food they're giving the birds, or they decrease on the quality of the food. What that means is that when the chickens reach production, they're not going to give you what you expect because they haven't developed the way they're supposed to develop. So for me, I had to make sure the birds get their food. And I went into debts. I had to borrow some money. Luckily enough, when the chickens started to lay, they performed really well, and I was able to get this money back and pay these people. But that was a really big challenge. The other challenge of getting workers, that's a challenge that the only way I could deal with was to fire the workers, Fire them, get someone else. Fire and get someone else. I had about 3 people who were thieves before I got the correct kind of person. And I don't feel like there's a way around it. It's difficult because actually the worst people usually to work with in business and in farming usually are family, relatives, because they don't understand the business aspect of it. For them, they only want to work with you as a brother. So they think they can take anything out. And for me, if you steal from me and you work, I can take you to police. But I can't take my brother to police. Yeah. So I would rather not have my brother on the farm, so that I'm not tempted to want to take my brother to police. So I had to keep hiring a lot of people from outside until, you get lucky and you get the right kind of person. And luckily for me, when I got lucky many times, because after the first person, then it became quite easy for me to get very many other good people. But it was a big hurdle that I struggled with. And then the hurdle of information was just to try and read as much as possible. Yeah. Get as many books as possible, read as much as possible. I can tell you the honest truth, almost all the information that I've gotten from poultry, I've got from books. I haven't gotten from farmers. I haven't gotten from other people's farms. Almost all of it I've gotten from books. All the information is available in books. So the way I transformed was that when I finished my 800 birds, they actually were profitable for me, which is not a common thing in farming, where your very first project is profitable. A lot of people make mistakes, a lot of people lose birds, the birds die and everything. So after that, I had built a 2-story chicken house. So I had space at the top. So what I did is that I brought 1,000 birds. I brought another 1,000 birds. So at some point I had 2,000 birds. Then during that time, I was lucky enough that also I created a YouTube channel where I was teaching a lot of people about poultry farming. And the advantage with having some of these things like a YouTube channel is that you have extra income coming in from the YouTube channel itself. You get paid. Now, this is money that I could personally reinvest back into the farm. In addition to the money that the farm is giving me, because the farm could give me about 50%, in terms of profit, yeah? So if I'm earning, let's say, 10 million in terms of sales, I'm giving 5 million as profit, simply because I'm doing my business very well and the chickens are laying very well. And then when I'm also getting money from the internet, from teaching people how to raise birds, I managed to get more money and buy more land. That was in my location over there. Yeah, buy more land and put up these structures. And of course, I was saving. I had this money that I had kept in my pocket. And then through that process, I always looked for a way of partnering with people to do bigger things. Because during that time, I had faced a problem. I had faced a problem where one of the days I wanted to have my farm supplied with day-old layer chicks. I paid a particular company money and it took them 6 months to supply me the chicks. It was very, very difficult for me. Every time I would go back, they would tell me, come back next week, come back next week. It was so frustrating. They were not returning my money. I told myself, someday I have to do a breeder farm. Come and buy. I must do a breeder farm. I was 100% certain. So since I had made up my mind that I'm going to do a breeder farm, first of all, I made sure that I do all the research about doing breeder farms as much as possible. So I got all the research, tried to save as much money that I could, and then tried to get as much information that I could. And then through that time, I had a friend who also wanted to do farming, some form of farming. So we just decided to come together, put funds together, and do a breeder farm. Yeah, and so this is the breeder farm that you're seeing right here. So when we started with the breeder farm, we actually started with a very small number of birds for breeders. Yeah, we started with just 3,000. Now it might look like a big number, but it's not a very big number because currently we've done over 60,000. Yeah, there's a time we had 40,000 layer breeders, 40,000 broiler breeders, 10,000 layer breeders, and even commercial birds on the farm. So 3,000 was a very small number, but we started out with 3,000 layer breeders. They started to lay eggs, we started producing chicks, and then it became profitable for us. We expanded, brought in 5,000 more for the layer breeders, and then we brought in broiler breeders. So that's how we managed to expand to such a big farm. So the farm is called Farm Up. Yeah, just like the YouTube channel that I do have, Farm Up. That's the name of the farm, and that's the exact brand which we use to sell the chicks on the market. If you just put in Farm Up on YouTube, Farm Up on the internet, you're going to see everything that we do. Usually, I share all the information that I can. I try to, not hide. If I'm facing problems, I share those problems with the farmers because they need to understand the reality of what happens on the farm. There's a time I had a breakout of fall typhoid. I lost 1,000 birds on the farm. At that time, I think I had, 1,500 birds, and 1,000 of the birds died because of fall typhoid. So when I have such challenges, I always make sure that I share them with people outside there so that they understand the challenges that someone goes through, because what happens to me is what can happen to you. And me growing quickly like this doesn't mean that I haven't gone through challenges. Oh yes, the thing with, I won't be very specific about exactly how much I earned, but what the realistic thing is that a lot of money can be earned from YouTube. A lot of money, you can earn upwards of 100 million every month from YouTube. Yeah, you can earn. My very first paycheck from YouTube was about $1,000. The very first one, the very first time YouTube started paying me, and that keeps growing. You understand? Yeah. So, and if you do business very well, even the farming itself, yeah, even the birds themselves, because with about 2,000 birds, I think I was keeping over 7 million a month, simply because I was doing proper farming practices, over 7 million a month with just 2,000 birds. You understand? And that's money that can be built, of course. So YouTube and the internet, not just YouTube alone, but the internet in general can actually pay a lot of people. There are a lot of people who I know earn upwards of 300 million a month simply from the internet. So when I started, I didn't start with a big farm. Like I've told you, I started with a small section of land from my dad. Well, it's probably a quarter an acre. After that, I managed to get money in Bali. Now, land in Bali is actually quite expensive, realistically speaking, because like it's a densely populated area, and the land is very fragmented. So even getting a single acre owned by one person is very hard. But I was lucky enough to get 3 acres, not very far away from where my farm was, and over there I expanded the farm. And it was from there, together with my partner, who I decided to partner with, when we came together and saved our money, that we managed to expand to the 400 acres. Now, realistically speaking, it's a lot of money, yeah, and I won't share the figures because it will be crazy for a lot of farmers. And the other thing that I usually share with farmers is that excelling in farming has nothing to do with the size of property that you have. It has nothing to do with it. A lot of people will look at 400 acres. For example, if you look at this 400 acres, a lot of it is empty. I believe when we were coming in, you saw it. A lot of it is empty. There is no chickens. There is no, we just have a few goats. They don't need 400 acres to feed. We just have a few chickens. They don't need 400 acres to feed. So all that land doesn't need to be used by a farm. So for a farm, on my channel, I always share with people how to maximize using small spaces. On this current farm, we have a chicken house over there, which is a 2-story chicken house. Very, very innovative. That chicken house, we feed the chickens from the top without entering. Yeah, you don't need to enter to give the chickens birds, but it's not mechanized. We don't use any electricity over there. We don't use any motors. We're not using anything imported. It was simply using knowledge that we produced from here. We came up with a feeding system that uses pipes where no one needs to enter that chicken house to give the chickens food, to give them water, and the eggs, the chicken lays the egg rolls to the outside. All those things were made from right here. Now, for you to have such a mechanism, you would need a lot of money if you're going to be importing it using machinery. You would need a lot of money. But we never needed a lot of money. We don't need a lot of money because you can do it using available materials. You understand? So with farming, you don't need to have too much money. That's what I always share with people. What you need to do is start with what you have, do what you do well. The biggest problem is that people compromise. Yeah? You don't give the chickens the best feed that they need. Instead of giving them very good feed, you give them, you just mix up the feed. If the chickens, for example, need 100 kilos of feed every day, you give them 80, you're not going to get the best results. Give them everything you need, they're going to give you what you need. Carry out the correct farming practices, proper biosecurity. Make sure that, for example, we are not inside the chicken house because the procedure to go inside the chicken house is very complicated, and I just won't let everyone go inside the chicken house. So I can't let, for example, a team enter the chicken house. It would be very, very difficult for me, considering how much money I've put inside the birds. It just doesn't make sense. So how much you start with is not what matters. What matters is to do things properly, and then you'll grow very systematically and very rapidly at that if you do things properly.